Welcome to The Brief. My name is Khaled Hassan. I'm an Egyptian British national security and geopolitics researcher, proud Zionist, and a former member of President Sisi's first presidential election campaign. Today we're unpacking one of the most subtle and consequential developments in the Middle East during the Iran war. Let me take you back to February 28th, 2026. Iran launched a massive barrage, missiles and drones, hammering Gulf cities, including the UAE. But the UAE took the worst of it. Officially, Egypt condemned the attacks. President Sisi called them criminal during visits to Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE. Cairo said Gulf security is Egyptian national security, but words are cheap. And Gulf voices quickly noticed Egypt was not putting real skin in the game. For weeks, Emirati commentators, influencers, and voices close to Abu Dhabi were openly critical. They accused Egypt of sitting on the sidelines while the UAE was hammered and absorbed all the hits. Kuwaiti writer Fuad al-Hashim went viral calling Egypt a stepmother to the Gulf, shattering the old mother of the Arab world image that Egypt promoted for decades. Emirati analyst Abdul Khalik Abdullah, who was also an advisor to the Emirati government, publicly expressed frustrations that Egypt had not even sent a squadron of F-16s or Rafales in solidarity. Social media campaigns in Kuwait, the UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia called for a fundamental reassessment of financial support to Cairo. The hashtag "deporting Egyptians is a national duty" trended as some Egyptian residents in the Gulf posted content that was actually sympathetic to Iran and critical of their host countries over hosting US military bases. But this wasn't just about military hesitation. The damage ran much deeper. Egyptian residents in the Gulf voiced pro-Iran sympathy, senior diplomatic figures in Cairo, and quasi-government analysts, including generals, retired generals like Samir Farag and commentator Osama al-Dalil, who are known for their closeness to the Egyptian government, made statements that Gulf observers read as soft on Tehran and critical of the Gulf. So a wave of Egyptian pundits defended Iran's right to resist, while reviving anti-Gulf tropes, including the fact that they make the argument that essentially the Gulf is reliant on the US for its defense. On top of all this, Egypt had spent the months before the war playing Saudi Arabia and the UAE against each other over Yemen and Sudan, trying to extract maximum investment promises from both sides in their rivalry. So why did Cairo take this risky path? It's actually pure desperation mixed with staggering miscalculation. Egypt's economy was already under massive pressure. Debt, IMF deals, skyrocketing energy costs, and the Gulf had been the lifeline for Egypt since Sisi assumed office. They provided investments, aid, and billions in remittance from Egyptian workers who reside in the Gulf. But decision makers in Cairo assumed the war would be short, like the previous round, the 12 Days War, and that the Ayatollah's regime would eventually survive. Days before the strikes, Egypt was actually still moving towards exchanging ambassadors with Tehran, a move that looked tone-deaf to the moment that the conflict was basically about to explode. Some even hoped closer ties with Iran could replace lost Gulf support or secure emergency energy assistance from Tehran. By early April, Egypt had come dangerously close to losing its most critical economic lifeline entirely. The combination of perceived opportunism, ingratitude, and hedging had poisoned relations with the Gulf. Then overnight, everything changed. On May 7th, 2026, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi stood shoulder to shoulder with UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan at a UAE military base. They inspected a squadron of Egyptian Air Force Rafale fighter jets and their pilots who are now stationed in the UAE. This was the first time Egyptian fighter jets have ever been forward deployed on UAE soil and actually publicly displayed in such manner. The UAE Ministry of Defense released the photos, Egyptian state media highlighted the solidarity, and suddenly the same Emirati voices that had been critical of Egypt for weeks started essentially singing Cairo's praises. Reliable partner, strategic ally, a brother. So now we need to look at the signals from the Saudi side. When President Sisi met Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, on March 21st, 2026 in Jeddah, as reported by Al Arabiya and the Saudi press agency, the reception was actually notably cold. MBS received him at King Abdulaziz International Airport, and that's largely where it stayed. There was no Grand Palace welcome, no extended private talks beyond the immediate meeting, and crucially, no major new financial pledges announced. If you contrast this with the warm, high-profile embrace from Mohammed bin Zayed, or MBZ, just weeks later, jets, pilots, photo ops, the entire works. This is not just body language. We also have seen major Saudi government-linked voices highly critical of Egypt's military support to the UAE. They're not thrilled about Egyptian Rafales now based in Emirati territory amid this intra-Gulf friction. Now, you need to remember, Abu Dhabi and Riyadh have clashed behind the scenes over Yemen, Sudan, and influence across the Horn of Africa. Egypt's move, deploying those Rafales, is being read in Riyadh as Cairo picking Abu Dhabi over them. Now, Egypt's economy is under massive pressure. Billions in debt, IMF deals, the whole 9 yards. The Gulf had been the traditional backer, massive investments, deposits, aid, the whole thing. But at this stage, only the UAE is both willing and able to offer Egypt the financial backing it desperately needs. Saudi Arabia, not so much. Riyadh has completely shifted its approach for years now, actually. Less blank checks grounds, more structured investments and loans with conditions. The UAE, on the other hand, has been pouring money in. Think about the massive Ras Al Hikma deal and other strategic deals. When push came to shove and Egypt needed urgent financial backing to stay stable and for President Sisi's regime to actually survive, Riyadh said, not this time. Abu Dhabi stepped up. So what does this mean? Egypt has made its choice. By sending those fighter jets and staging that very public show of unity and solidarity with Mohammed bin Zayed, Cairo is essentially signaling it's aligning with Abu Dhabi in the bigger Emirati-Saudi power play. It's not about being anti-Saudi. Egypt still values the relationship and hopes to make money out of it. But it's actually about cold, hard necessity. In this equation, financial survival trumped neutrality. This is classic Sisi-era foreign policy. It's reactive, it's driven by economic survival, rather than long-term grand strategy. After risking its lifeline through miscalculation and mixed signals, Egypt is now scrambling to salvage the partnerships it cannot survive without. Starting with the UAE, the one partner still ready and willing to deliver.